Yes. One of my least favorite arguments to address is the simple "were you there" argument that is put forth by a lot of creationists and theists in particular when they attempt to argue for the validity of their arguments. So the basic version of this argument, which has multiple variations, but how it applies to theism in particular would be this. God created the universe. Well, I point out the logical inconsistencies with that. I point out why it's not compatible with reality as we know it. I point out the multiple reasons why I don't think it's even possible for a God to exist, let alone create an entire universe, literally from nothing. And the theist will retort by asking me, well, were you there? How do you know that it didn't happen? Of course, with the full knowledge that it was completely impossible for me to be there. It's impossible for anyone to be there at any given time to observe and quantify whether or not this thing has happened. So, being honest, I would say no. And they would say, then you are essentially admitting that it's impossible to disprove such a thing happened, and the fact that you don't believe it happened means you're running on faith. Now, I once again have to say it's impossible for me to 100% prove or disprove anything beyond my own existence. I feel that people, both atheists and theists alike, seem to be laboring under the rather, I would say, misguided notion that things are black and white, when it's not quite so simple and there are subtle shades of gray in between. But while I can't 100% prove or disprove anything, that is not a good reason for me to stop using my logic and my reasoning in order to show whether or not something has any merit to it. I may not be able to show 100% if it's true or not, but I can at least show that it's true or not true beyond any reasonable doubt. Of course, what I perceive to be true or not true is completely different from what someone else does. And only a few opinions really have any applicability here in reality. So the very first thing that someone, I think, should say when a theist asks, were you there, is that a rhetorical question, or are you just taking me for a fool? It should be noted that no one in academia would be so arrogant to assume that they have to be present at that very point in order to consider something as remotely factually true. For example, the whole process of peer review is essentially based upon scientists doing work and other scientists either confirming said work or citing previous works. So for example, I know that biological evolution is a fact beyond any reasonable doubt because that's what the scientific papers tell me. I may not have been there, but I could personally conduct certain experiments that could show the transitions within species. I could conduct certain experiments molecularly, genetically, even within geology to show the processes of evolution. However, I am not a trained professional. I do not have those qualifications, and until I get those qualifications, I cannot speak from authority that I am sufficiently able to provide a good background on these topic areas. Of course, this system always has its double checks. For instance, we must be certain that the sources for our information are not biased. We must be certain that they are at least done by credible individuals, and if they're not, then their sources are cited, which are from credited individuals in that field. We have to be certain that this person is trying to stand from the most objective point of view possible, and if they are holding a bias, then they have to give their justifications as to why. So, as for the existence of God, well, do I know for sure that God did not create the world 6,000 to 10,000 years ago? Of course not. I was not there 6,000 to 10,000 years ago, but I can see from geology that the world is much older than that. And if God had any influence on the world, then it's either negligible or completely unnoticeable to humanity. So no, I'm not God. I'm not omniscient. I can't tell you 100% exactly why a God doesn't exist. However, I can show everyone why I personally think that the existence of such a being cannot be proven and therefore should not be accepted as real. I may not be able to do this 100%, and there may be evidence that will come along eventually that will throw my argument out of the water, but as for now, I thoroughly believe that the existence of a God cannot be proven beyond any reasonable doubt, and that anyone who does believe in a God, personally, I feel, is irrational. May the truth always be heard.